Welcome into another episode of the Sick Podcast of Draft Vogel. I'm John Vogel, your host, and today we've got polarizing prospects on the mind. And there's a few in this class that there seems to be some people that really like, other people don't, and we want to get into the nitty-gritty and talk about the details. Justen and Mark are both here. Shane back in the studio as usual. Shane, let's get us started.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel.
With the first pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the first pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, with the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft.
The sickest NFL Draft Show. It's gonna be sick.
So recently, we haven't had a lot of time, the three of us, to sit down and talk ball. So I feel like this is going to be a reunion of sorts, if you want to call it that. Something where we can kind of sit down. We've done a lot of great interviews. If you haven't checked them out already, be sure that if you're not subscribed on YouTube, if you're not following us on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform, you need to be doing that. Stay up to date. We have some really great ones that we've done here recently with John Rice Plumlee, Ben Bryant, Trey Knox, and Kamani Vital, several guys that are going to the NFL Combine next month. One of the the great Gabriel and Grayson Murphy, the Murphy twins, and then Austin Reed, quarterback out of Western Kentucky. A lot of really good guys we've had come through here, and that's your opportunity to sit down and get an inside scoop into how they operate and how they see the game. So let's go ahead and bring the guys in and get this thing underway, because Justen Gam's in the house. Mark Jarvis is in the house. Old Marky Mark. How are we guys doing?
Happy to be back, buddy. I feel like we said that last time too, but it's been a tough season for us. Trying to get all of us together. So,
it's getting everybody together and getting everybody on the same page. That's two completely different things. But the thing I've noticed about the three of us over our time as analysts, and working in this industry, we tend to kind of be on the same page for the most part. So when we talk about polarizing prospects, one of the things that's kind of interesting, I think, is when we talk about people that we look at and all that stuff, like we're normally on the same page. So we got a few guys here that we wanted to talk about and get into some, details about. And I honestly have no idea where you guys are with either one of the first couple guys that we're going to talk about. But I wanted to get us started off talking about JJ McCarthy, the Michigan quarterback, who I guess he's polarizing, because I've seen opinions all over the board. I've seen
national
there's no real consensus. Yeah, national champion winner, 2-year starter at Michigan. Mark, you've been quiet here in the first minute, so why don't we put you in the spotlight? Tell us what you think about JJ McCarthy.
Mark, you got a cool haircut, by the way. He looks so sleek right now.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
yeah,
you.
no, it's sick.
I just bust it down real easy, make it nice and simple. So for me, McCarthy, tape grade, I was thinking more maybe late one, mid to late one, depending. I'm not necessarily saying the type of, he's going to go top 5. To me, and I can pull up my notes real quick if you don't mind, because he kind of put me on the spot there with it. Also, my daughter's downstairs yelling, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, daddy."
Hey, as we always say, this is a family podcast.
Yeah. Wait, no.
So my notes for him: quick setup and release really stands out. Efficient footwork. I stay downfield when he has to break the pocket. Very clean, catchable ball. Hits guys in the stride. Really good, consistent placement, whether he's throwing from the pocket or on the move. Composed guy, not going to panic when he's put under pressure. Not a high-end athlete, but a guy who can escape, continue to make plays outside of structure. Very consistent. What I wrote down in the notes was very steady heartbeat, regardless of the situation. And really like the touch and placement overall. Kind of an average arm, not a guy who's going to really wow you with velocity, in my opinion. Some of the real far side throws will float a little bit. But overall, one of those guys who I think the biggest question with him is going to be more about, hey, why didn't he get more of a workload? And obviously they're a juggernaut. They kind of just march through everyone. And, it shows with you march your way to a national championship behind that running game. But I think that's kind of the question is, hey, did we see enough of him really put in bad situations and pull them out of it? Is that something he can do? Or is he more of just, not to label him a game manager, but is that more of what he is?
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah.
I think I saw the best comp for him recently, and I think it's starting to float around like a lot on Twitter the past few days, maybe like week. But it was Alex Smith. And I think he's got a stronger arm than Alex Smith. But when you talk about frame, athleticism, types of guys they are, like overall as players and quarterbacks, like they're nearly identical. I think the cool thing about McCarthy is he's got a better arm. You see sometimes his feet get a little wonky. Sometimes you can tell he doesn't follow through the right way with his release. But he's got an arm sometimes where you're like, that's, I think Eastern Carolina, it was that game and a few other ones where he threw some far hash throws, one to the end zone, and you're like, dude, he can cannon it there if he needs to. He can really drive it in there. Nevertheless, I think, in a redraft, everything you know about Alex Smith today, everything you know, where would Alex Smith go, like in a vacuum? Where would you draft him? Getting that type of career and that kind of consistent, like steady starter, where does Alex Smith go, in your opinion, you guys?
Top 15.
Right.
I would think. Probably he wouldn't be first overall because, you got Aaron Rodgers in that freaking draft class.
Yeah, even if he's not in that class, though, like even if he's just a talent, you just say, all right, I would take that guy top 15. You agree?
Yeah,
What's that?
I'm not opposed to that. I would say, yeah, top 15. Top 15.
Right.
It depends class dependent too, right? Like if it's like, let's say you throw him into like the class with Pickett and Willis and all those guys.
Yeah. He's going first overall.
It's a far different conversation than class right now, where it's like, hey, well, we've got, potentially, 3-4 guys ahead of him.
Right. But I think that's where I've kind of landed on JJ. And I think people were either like way too high, like wins national championship, blah, blah, blah. He has to go first. He has to be the top quarterback. How could he not? And then you hear the guys that are like, well, he didn't get a workload. How could you ever draft him high? And I understand that because he didn't get a lot of reps that we really want him to get. And there's not a lot on tape that we wish we would have seen. But that's the Harbaugh offense. That's the way Harbaugh operates. So we can't really hold it against JJ as that he can't do it, but more that it's going to be a big learning curve when he gets to the NFL. But I think he is worth that top 15 pick, like you said, John. And I think it's more of just kind of finding that middle ground and realizing, look, if we get Alex Smith with a little bit stronger arm, there's a lot worse you can do. And a quarterback needy team is probably going to pull the trigger on that, 9 out of 10 times, maybe 10 out of 10.
I like the Alex Smith comp. I think that I hadn't seen that one yet. So that tells you how much I'm paying attention to what everybody else is saying.
It's best to
stay sometimes, I like to grind the tape instead. It's like I see y'all, and sometimes I see things, and sometimes I see things I really don't want to. But one of the things I think that's really interesting about him was, you talk about the usage, you talk about the offense. And I was talking to, I think it was Manny Diaz when I was down in Mobile this couple weeks ago for the Senior Bowl. I ran into him at Veets. So, Veets is where you run into everybody, and that's the place to be.
Yeah.
And Manny was great. I kind of had to prove to him at first, like, hey, I actually kind of know what I'm talking about with football. And so here's how the conversation goes. It's basically like, hey, can I ask you, how you doing, coach? How's everything? And he's like trying to get away, because he's whatever. It's, it's a bar and Veets and Mobile and who knows. And I just said, hey, coach, I said, can I ask you something about Chop Robinson? He said, yeah, what you got? I said, so does he have a plan going into a rep? And he kind of leans in. He's like, what do you mean? I said, if he's going against an inside puncher, horizontal setter, like, does he know how to handle that? And he's like, oh, okay. And the mitts came off. We started talking ball. It was great. So anyways, like Manny, he was telling me about his edge rushers. He said, if you want to understand those edge rushers, go back to the Michigan game. Because the whole first half, they couldn't run a 3-step drop without getting hit by either Chop or Adisa.
They were tormenting.
So that's why they ran the ball 30 fucking times in a row. That's a quote, direct quote. Okay, so if you look at the Michigan offense last year, and when they would face, those defensive fronts like that where they had the issues, which they didn't have a lot of issues all year, you kind of understand, they could lean on their run game. They had 3 running backs that they could rotate through there. A couple guys that are going to be really early picks, and Blake Corum, I think that he's probably, a day 2 guy. And then you've got, Donovan Edwards, who will probably be a day 2 guy next year, if not sliding up into day one. His versatility is dynamic.
Yeah.
Not to say that he's the best running back next year. I don't know. We'll see with the long process before then. But
You're safe, buddy,
that offense, right? That offense limits you to a certain extent. With all the different with what you want out of your quarterback. So what I did see is when you go back to the TCU game, you see that he has an arm and that he can throw the ball a freaking mile. So TCU, I think last year in the playoff was the best game for him to kind of showcase his overall skill set. And I think he's a little bit better of an athlete than people want to give him credit for, because you see him pulling away from people he has no business pulling away from, turning corners, breaking angle. Overall, though, I have to wonder, like you guys are talking about game manager. When I didn't think I was going to like his tape, but when I got done with him, I was sitting there like, I'm not so sure like Drake Maye's better than this guy right now. I'm really not. And it's because like when you see, it's you don't know exactly what he's done. What he limited, whatever you call it, limited quarterbacking, a lot of underneath throws. You could see he's really on top of it with processing. They're running all kinds of different, scheme types, from the RPO to under center traditional offense to shotgun spread. Like they're throwing all kinds of stuff into this offense, and he's running it and he's processing, and you can see him make those adjustments. He doesn't miss many people that are open. And so when I kind of got done with the tape, I was kind of like, I'm not so sure. Like the guys, the three that we've been talking about up here are really the top three guys in this class. He's got that kind of upside where we could be looking back at this as a redraft, like you're talking about, and he's really like a top 5 guy in the class. Yeah.
I'll throw this out if you don't mind. Sorry to interrupt again. You like the game manager thing. I would agree with that because the tape, just going off purely tape, you would say he doesn't look like one, right? But if you look at the profile overall, I feel like it looks like one. I watched the tape and it's like this guy just doesn't miss. He's very, very consistent. He's comfortable in every situation. And his overall game, you fall in love with it. But at the same time, you see, okay, he had 8 passes against Penn State in a close victory and things like that. And you start to kind of wonder, okay, was the rushing game that dominant to where they just leaned on that all the time? Or was it, what was going on there to where they didn't feel comfortable kind of turning him loose more? And it might just be, hey, that's just what the scheme was, and that's just the situation he was in, and you have to project solely off the tape, and I get that. But I think people are going to be divided on that in the league of how much can you overlook that when you're risking an early first-round pick.
No, right. That's a good point. Yeah, I would say that you're going to see the same type of divide between the older scouts and the younger scouts that you saw with Will Levis last year. That's what I think.
That's not a bad. I mean, that's a pretty similar scenario. That kind of makes sense. I understand that. The thing people are going to point to is that the staff raves about him and his demeanor and like how comfortable he is, how prepared he is, how good of a processor he is. Plus, he's a winner, whatever that means. But he did win the national championship. You know what I mean? I think the only thing you can really knock him for, like legitimately, is just the amount of reps that he got as a quarterback throwing the ball and stuff. But yeah, there's the main thing is that his fault or not? And when you look back at Harbaugh's offenses in the past and everything he's done, his blueprint is always the path of least resistance. And if they know they can win running the ball, he doesn't think twice about taking the ball away from JJ. And it's not saying JJ can't, but why risk it when you know like this safe option will get us the victory? And I think that's what sucks about JJ and why he's so polarizing. But well, I mean, and it's also the thing too, it's like even though it's not his fault, is it going to affect his NFL future? And it might, because there's got to be that point when he gets to the NFL, if he goes down and a team asks him to throw 40 times a game, there's probably a lot he hasn't seen and a lot he might not even know about his own passing abilities yet. So you're probably going to have to live with, unless he goes somewhere that allows him to really kind of like creep into the game plan like Alex Smith got to and just kind of become slowly better and better. But if you ask him to come in and kind of go balls to the wall, you're probably going to have to live with turnovers and some boneheaded decisions and just a guy that's kind of uncomfortable. But I think that's where teams get that advantage of they're going to meet with him and kind of learn who he is and know if he'll be able to bounce back from that. But us, we're just hoping like, well, I saw like 2 sick throws against Eastern Carolina. Hopefully those translate next year against the Ravens. You know what I mean?
It wasn't even just that. I mean, like he had that throw against, I think it was Ohio State, where he threaded double coverage. It was a 15-yard throw over the middle to Roman Wilson.
Yeah.
That was, it showed right velocity, right?
Right.
He can put it through a window.
Yeah, he can ignite it a little bit.
No, and that's what you see flash. But
Yeah.
going back to the whole point of being a game manager in that offense, he's not asked to.
Yeah.
Your whole purpose is to win ball games. And yeah, you can go back and say the one game that he lost as a starter at Michigan was against the University of Georgia, who won the national championship, and it was in the playoffs. Like they've never really had to face. Well, okay, no, it's TCU. My bad. Excuse me.
I was gonna say,
TCU,
wait,
Cade McNamara.
What did I remember?
Who lost to the national championship? That's one thing. Yeah, and I was thinking from 2 years ago. But so TCU is his one loss, and that was really a controversial loss. It was back and forth. Some of the calls didn't really go their way, especially there in the first half. They kind of took 2 touchdowns off the board. But he showed a lot in that game that we hadn't seen yet. And it was the one time you really saw Michigan in that situation where they looked like they felt like they were out of control. The rest of the time, they've always been in control while he's been their quarterback. Yeah. And I think that says something, to the aspect of how well he's picking up on the game plan, how well he's understanding how he needs to go out there and take care of his job and what he needs to accomplish. And I think that's why he's going to walk into interviews as reported. Everybody around him says it. He's going to blow people away.
I keep wondering this question too. Switch him and Jaden Daniels this past season. Is LSU better than they were with Daniels? Is Michigan better than they were with McCarthy? Because personally, I don't think Michigan wins the national championship and is a better team with Jaden Daniels as their quarterback as opposed to JJ McCarthy. I don't. I think, JJ was so smooth, so poised. He made some, insane throws over the middle of the field through tight window. He just did so many things under pressure, but he did them so calmly. And I don't know if that passing game, when they called upon it, looks the same with Jaden Daniels under center, where I think he could have done a lot of the things Daniels did with his arm and probably could have done things with his arm that Daniels ended up doing with his legs. But I think McCarthy was such a better passer in certain scenarios that my argument would be LSU probably has the same win-loss, maybe a little better, and their passing game is more consistent, where Michigan is not the same. And that's not the greatest argument because we're more about projecting going into the NFL as opposed to what they would have looked like last year. But I think that's just me trying to say McCarthy is capable of more than what was asked of him. It's just now to teams to figure out like how much more, how much can he become, what's his floor, what's his ceiling? Is he going to come into the league and look like Baker Mayfield, or is he going to rise up a little higher than that? Should we keep him at Alex Smith level? It's kind of that type of thing. So, but he is. Go ahead. Sorry.
Do you think that if you put Daniels on Michigan, that they would rework that offense to play more into his running ability?
Yes, and that might have not gone well because he's the skinniest guy I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Like I don't, and that's another part of Jaden that scares me is that frame. We talk about how dynamic he is as a runner, which is fantastic, but that frame is not something I want him to run with. You know what I mean? Like I don't think that's something you say that's part of our game plan, because you're asking for him to get killed eventually. And he's not the slithery, snaky type runner that Lamar is, where Lamar can really contort himself, knows how to avoid hits. Jaden is kind of more of a RG3 type runner where it's north-south, and you see him take some monster hits because of it. And I just don't know if putting that aspect of football, which is him, the quarterback run, into the game plan is super, super smart. It might have won in college, but I'm not confident in that. I can't be confident saying that would have been the best way to go about it.
The other question I had would be, do you think the narrative around McCarthy is different if he doesn't win the national championship? Let's say they lose by 10 to Bama.
Yeah. I don't know. I rarely hear that argument. Like I've heard it a few times, like, well, he's a winner, but it's not from the most credible people. From the people that I trust, and even you guys, and like the podcast that I listen to with like, DJ and Bucky and some of like the more respected podcasts of guys who know what they're talking about. Rarely do I hear them say like, he won a natty, so that's why he's boosted. It's more about his like John said, his flashes on tape and the poise he has and how calm he is. You mentioned that in your eval of him, Mark. It's like he's always at this, this pulse. It's you never see him panic or just do stupid shit. He's not pulling a Baker Mayfield in the backfield, crapping himself, or a Jimmy Garoppolo spinning around when there's no one on him. He's very almost boring to watch sometimes because you're like, he's doing the stuff he's supposed to do. It's not exciting because it's not bad, but it's also not Caleb Williams where he's asked to control the offense and guide it, 50 times a game. It's more of just do this rep, keep us on schedule, steer the bus. Everything's good.
That just reminded me of all the people I've seen say he's Zach Wilson 2.0. It's like I cannot think of guys who are further apart in terms of the way they play the game.
Well, people are saying that about Caleb. They're saying that about JJ. It's like the new comp for anybody that kind of makes plays off script. Zach Wilson. I hate that. Unbelievable.
We got one other guy that's a little bit polarizing right now because I think the consensus on JJ in this room, at least from what I'm hearing, is he's a projection because we really don't know. We like the flashes. If you like the flashes, you're gonna like him really high. If you like the lack of usage, you don't like that, then he's not gonna be high. But he is 1,000% a projection at this point. You're projecting him to do well. But I mean, that's part of scouting, right? Is projection. So,
and I mean, John, you probably real quick. You might have you're more up to date with all this stuff, but like it really depends on. I mean, like the team that JJ gets drafted to probably will immediately give us like an insight into like, shit, this is not going to go well, or like, oh, that's a perfect fit. You know what I mean? And like, I know you're up to date with like who's the offensive coordinators, what they do, all that stuff. So, is there any team, real quick? Is there one team in the top 15 that you're like, no, he should not go there, and is there also maybe a team that you're like, that's perfect?
Well, see, the thing with him is he's a West Coast quarterback, right?
Right.
Quick processor, keep a lot of stuff underneath, but has the ability to put it down the field and do all those things.
Yeah.
25 teams in the league this year are projected to be running a West Coast offense. It's exactly what Michael Lombardi's been talking about like for the last year. Everybody's doing the same shit, and it's guarding your desk. That's literally what's going on.
Okay.
There's not really – I mean, if you look at the other two, if he goes to an Air Coryell system, are you going to be happy with that? Probably not. He could probably go run a Perkins Earhart system and be just fine. You know what I'm saying? Like, he'll be fine.
Okay. What's one team in the top 15 that you're like, please don't go there, though? Just curious.
Vegas.
Is there any?
Maybe. But Vegas is even supposed to run a West Coast. It's just going to be a weird West Coast.
Yeah, I mean,
they got Devontae.
Yeah.
It's going to be Luke Getsy is the OC over there. So,
that'd be crazy. Yeah, okay. Interesting.
No, it's I don't know. I feel like JJ is not going to get picked high unless it's a team that knows exactly what they're doing with them right off the bat. So that'd be my guess.
Interesting. I like it.
Keon Coleman, Florida State wide receiver. I think he's an X. I think he's a number 1. But Jarvis, you went first last time, so Gam, go ahead and tell us what you think about Keon Coleman because it's another guy. I really don't know what you guys think of him.
I was just talking this morning to a guy I used to do a podcast with, Justin Walters, who is Sports Ruckus on Twitter, and we were talking about Keon, and he said, I want to, because he thinks his opinion was Keon Coleman is probably going to go in the last 10 picks of the draft of the first round if he goes in the first round, and that's the same range as a guy like A.D. Mitchell from Texas, who is thin, borderline skinny, but so explosive in his movement, such a loose route runner. The ceiling for him looks high just because of the way that he can play outside his frame, but he's, so like sleek and explosive. He looks like a sports car out there running around. Where Keon is a big physical dude who has some yard after the catch potential. He's a returner sometimes that we've seen him make some big plays like that, but it's more of he's not going to burn you with speed or suddenness. But we were talking about it, and I just thinking, like, when I watched Keon play, there was not a game this year where we watch Keon and you don't feel him on the field. Like, he has presence on the field. Even though he's not the fastest, smoothest, whatever, there's so much ability he has as a contested catcher and just a physical, dominant dude that defenses will have to respect him. And if you pair him with another good receiver on an NFL team, that's dynamic. I mean, that's just a dangerous duo. It's dynamic. I don't know if he has the highest ceiling as an X, but I do know that his strengths are hard to find in today's day and age. We don't see a lot of these big dudes coming in dominating anymore. It's a lot of run after catch types. It's a lot of guys that are kind of throwing the ball when they're open as opposed to throw it and he's open. He's a dying breed. And I think just the way that he's so physical and so big, it's worth a first-round pick if you know how you're going to use him. I wouldn't say that I advise a team that has no other good pass catchers to really take him and expect him to carry the load because he's not going to be open all the time. He's not a separator. He's not that guy that you can just say, run the entire route tree. You're going to look good against all the cornerback ones in the NFL. He's not that guy. But he is probably a number 2 as far as like target and volume share. But he can probably be your X and play on the line of scrimmage and, kind of mess people up in his releases and get his hands on cornerbacks who want to get their hands on him. He wins a lot of those battles, which is crazy to see. He can move dudes around, and his technique's going to get better. So I think he's worth a first-round pick. I just think you got to have a plan with him. Don't run your offense through him.
Jarvis?
I'm going to break out PFF on you, Gam. I'm going to break your heart.
Yes.
So,
man, right after the episode, too. Man, come on.
No.
I just read their book. I have to do it. I have to ask first, what do you think he runs?
I think I'm higher on people than I think I'm higher on Keon. I think he's going to run faster than most people do.
Well, here's the problem. We used to say, what are they going to run? And it felt legit. Now it's like, what does he play on tape? And what is he going to train for the combine, right? Like N'Keal Harry ran in the 4.4s and he's a 4.7 guy on tape. And I think Keon is like the redo of N'Keal, but he's he's like the successful version. I think he's going to run 4.55. That's where I'm going to settle at. And I could be so wrong, but that's where I'm settling at. Off tape, I think he's a 4.55 to 4.6 guy. And I think he'll probably get to the 4.55.
What do you think, John?
I'm thinking he's running a 4.45.
Okay.
Ooh. We're 0.1.
I think he comes out with a crazy, crazy athletic profile. Like the vert's might be close to 40.
Former basketball player. I mean, he's going to jump. I feel like he's going to jump. I feel like his jumps are going to be elite. His speed is the only part of his game.
Not just a former basketball player there, Cam. I mean, this guy played 4 games at Michigan State.
Oh, okay.
At Michigan State, bro. He actually took the
he's a
play
big
there.
Time player. Yeah, he's a big time player.
Think about how crazy that is. You're in college, you're taking full-time class schedule, you're playing football, and then as soon as the football season's over, you're going over there and working out with the top 25 basketball team. Think about that for a second.
Right. That's why I think his jumps are crazy. I think he's going to jump out the gym every which way. I think everything he does is good. I just think top end speed is where we're going to be like, that's the only thing. I think he
runs a 4.45 in shorts. Personally,
that'd be crazy because then we'd see him fight for like the top 4 to 5. Like he'd move into the Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., Neighbors, maybe Brian Thomas range of like, well, he's also fast and big. So now what? That'd be cool. I'd welcome that. That'd be amazing. Sorry, Jarvis, we cut you off there. But
sorry, we're over here.
I don't know what we're talking about anymore.
The stat I was going to mention is his contested catch percentage. He was 33%. He was 10 completed out of 30 attempts. Now take that for what you will with how they track it. You could say, oh, they misjudged this. It's not a real contested catch, so on and so forth. That's lower than Marvin Harrison. That's lower than Odunze. Odunze's 21 of 28. That's lower than Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Polk.
Question real quick.
On the list.
PFF charts contested catch as anytime there's like a guy on your back even, right? So like a deep throw that went over your shoulder and you basket caught. If there's a guy on your ass, that's contested catch, correct?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to say I don't know. I don't want to misinterpret the way they do it. So
I think that's exactly what it is.
But what I'm saying is it is lower than almost every other, big name receiver at the top.
And that's why I think the other guys are faster, so they're probably going to be able to separate more. I think he's making a lot of these contested catches that are actually true contested catches as opposed to these other guys who are faster than him making just regular catches that PFF is labeling as that. And that's where I think that part of his game lacks a little bit is that speed. But John, go ahead.
And one of the things, too, that I've seen about Keon, some of the deeper analytical people talking about separation percentages, and like his margin of separation is among the bottom tiers of wide receivers in this class. But
don't care.
If you also look at the other Florida State players, they're all at the bottom too. You know why? Because as much as people love Jordan Travis, he could not deliver a good ball half the time.
Yeah.
So if you're throwing to a guy that's running a 4.5 and you're throwing it to him like he's running a 4.6, you got to reach behind you. You got to slow down for that catch. Now that separation percentage that we're talking about, that average, decreases because now that defender's closing in on the play. So that's not even a great statistic to bring up because what I see from him is he's good through his breaks. I really like his route running ability. I think he creates a lot of initial separation. There's a lot of plays where he has to slow down and make the catch. Now, Jordan Travis is probably going to be a really good backup quarterback in the league. I think he sticks around for a long time. Clearly loves football. I love that about him.
He's Gardner Minshew.
Right. He's not a guy that you're going to sit there and say, oh, yeah, this is how I'm going to build my franchise around this guy. He's going to go 5th, 6th round if his medicals hold up, which they should. I don't see why they wouldn't. But that's where he's going to be. Whereas with Keon, so Keon and Johnny Wilson was a victim of this. Jaheim Bell was a victim of this. Like, they have these really bad, separation charts because of the lack of accuracy that they were playing with from the quarterback position. So, to me, the other thing I'm going to bring up about Keon as well is like we're talking about 6'4", 215, basketball player, football player. I really do think and that's why my projection on him is so high is because I think he tests out of the water. Yeah. I think that he blows everybody away. I think everybody's going to be like, oh my God, who is this guy? Blah, blah, blah. We put him up there. Now with some things I've heard about some of the top receivers in this class that I don't want to go into publicly, not yet, not prepared for that, as I've learned this year. Don't say everything publicly. I think that there's a really good chance he could sneak ahead of a couple of guys we've been talking about for a long time, especially if you've got a wide receiver room that needs an X. You got a guy that could be, or two guys that could be really good complementary pieces. You just need that one guy on the outside. And I think that the other thing, the contested catch thing that you brought up, I'm going to give you another stat from PFF. Brock Bowers last year, 22% contested catch rate, according to PFF.
What's that comparable to other tight ends, though, is the question.
Well, that's my point. It's
so much of it depends on the
fine. Yeah.
So much of it depends on the play call too, though, because half the time when you're running a back shoulder fade, I'm not trying to separate. I'm keeping the corner on my hip, right? Like I don't want to get ahead of him. I'm making sure he's with me. The play that sent, what was it? The Clemson game? Was it the game winner or into overtime, where they threw that just contested catch to Keon against Clemson, and then they went on to win? That play was called. They just said, Keon, go run over there. We know a guy's going to be in your ass. We're just throwing it up to you. You're not even supposed to separate. Like, just go there. You're big and you're better. Do this. That's why some of those stats, like, I get how they're useful, but that's that's why we had that, the episode talking about PFF. We'd be sitting there with the PFF guy, and he'd say, I didn't get separation. Bro, he's not supposed to. Not the way the back shoulder fade works. We just said, Florida State just said, our athlete's better than your athlete. We're going to prove it. And then he gets a touchdown, didn't separate. I don't care. That was not the point of that.
They were 13-0 going into their bowl game.
Yeah. I do. And like, I'm on the side of saying, I think Keon isn't the fastest guy. He gets separation because he's physical and has a big stride, but I don't think he's a pure separate. And I don't think a team should ask him to be that guy. That's not the way to, run your offense, in my opinion. But
I also made the mistake in 21 of looking at the separation data and thinking that Jamar Chase wasn't going to be a great wide receiver in the NFL because he couldn't separate. When in reality, the separation that Jamar creates is usually in the last 10 steps of or 10 yards of his route.
Yeah, he has that gear and bam.
Yeah, where he lulls you in. Oh, I'm running, bam. He hits that next gear. And that's where he separates. So like,
is it a reach?
It goes exactly back to what we just were talking about PFF, which is like, and I'm not, Mark, we're not trying to shit on you.
I'm going to top rope you. So go ahead and finish your point. I'll top rope.
Here we go.
Okay. Yep.
I'm done talking. Yeah, I want Mark to do it. I'm not going to get more ammo.
You tried to do the Bowers comment about, I just want to know, you said 22%. He had 9 opportunities. He was 2 of 9 this year. Last year, he was 13 of 17. So overall through his career, Bowers has had a great contested catch percentage.
I was pointing at the 1%. I mean, the 1 year where they're like, 2 out of 9. It's like, yeah.
What? Well, and that's the thing with a stat like that is the sample size is so small, right? Like Keon Coleman, if you say, okay, he was 10 of 30, it's like, 1, are they charted correctly? And 2, if we rerun it over and over again, how many of those does he come down with versus where other guys were coming down with him, right? Like no contested catch is built the same. It's an imperfect stat. But the point being is, hey, if this guy is that contested catch guy, that's kind of a red flag stat to me of, okay, this guy, if he's supposed to be that 4.55 jump ball guy, you would think he'd be a little bit more dominant in that aspect. So
Right.
I don't know. I know you think he's dominant in that aspect. I've seen a lot of stats, people kind of freaking out over about it. So we'll see. I think the combine is going to answer a lot of questions about him.
And I think quarterbacks, I mean, you see a lot of times too, quarterbacks will put their guy in a contested catch situation, but that doesn't mean the throw is where it's supposed to be. And so not all contested catches are created the same, you know, because as a quarterback, you know where the guy wants it or where's the best place to make him go get it. Where sometimes with Jordan Travis, like what was that? Was it the catch that Keon Coleman made late in the year where he like reaches behind him, John, and one hands it? And I'm like, Jordan, that's the worst throw I've ever seen. Like, come on, dude. And that's the thing. That's a contested catch. And if he dropped it, it would go against him. Yeah. Fuck that. That is insane throw or an insane catch that he made as a contested. And he's not going to get credit for how insane that was. He's just going to get another notch on the contested catch made. That is not fair. And that is Jordan Travis just giving him an absolute. And that's the thing. If there's a safety on the other side, that's a murder ball. Like he is dead. He's in the hospital right now recovering. And luckily there wasn't, and he made that crazy catch. But it's just, it goes back to using our eyes sometimes. And, you know, I guess just going with your gut. You can't make yourself believe something you really don't believe. And I think me and John, I think he's going to run slower, but I think you and I are on the same page of this guy is wildly athletic. If he gets drafted, let's just say he goes at 9 to the Bears. They take Caleb at 1. They draft him at 9 to pair with DJ Moore. Do you think that's a reach? Or do you think that's
okay? See, you just led into exactly where I wanted to go into wrapping up this episode with.
Okay.
So we'll start with Keon. How high can he go? Is 9 a reach, Jarvis?
Depends what he runs, right?
I would just say it all depends on what he runs because that's going to either verify or it's going to verify it, or if teams love him, or it's going to scare teams away. If he runs 4.5, I don't think there's a chance he gets up there. If he goes out there and runs like 4.38 or something, and it's kind of all bets are off. You know, someone might really who loves him is like, hey, we had him, you know, top of the first round grade. Let's go get him. We verified that. So I think it's just very testing dependent.
So here's what's crazy is I just did a mock draft of the Browns draft podcast, and I had him go 6 to the Giants.
Wow. You're an insane person.
I think I know I am insane, but like I got a feeling about this one, guys, where it's like somebody I could really see Brian Dable loving this guy. You know what I'm saying? Because the whole Giants front office, really, because they tried to bring in Kenny Golladay a few years ago.
Yeah.
To play that role, and Kenny failed. They want somebody like that. And I just
right. And that's the thing too.
I don't think 9 is too high. I think 6 is where he is the top end of where he ends up going, assuming that Harrison comes off the board.
I hope he runs fast, man. I hope he runs so fast. And that's the thing. Even if he runs 4.55 and becomes a dominant player in the league, we'll probably wonder why he fell to 29 or 32. You know what I mean? Like it's just gonna depend on how good of a player he is. But right now it's a height, weight, speed auction. So teams aren't going to overpay if they don't have to. And I think that's why, he has to run fast. And remember at the beginning of the year when I tweeted out what makes Marvin Harrison Jr. better than Keon Coleman? I didn't think Coleman was better. I just wanted to hear people articulate it to me. And now it doesn't feel crazy, especially if he runs fast. But at the time, I mean, I remember getting blasted on Twitter. And now he's being mocked to the Giants at 6 by John Vogel. So it's all
so last question to wrap this thing up. How high is too high for JJ McCarthy?
Let me look at Tankathon real quick.
Got to look at the draft order.
Yeah, I do.
Hey, this is a really good opportunity to plug my draft document, which, you know, my draft guide has the entire NFL draft order in it at your disposal.
All right, how high is too high?
I would say 2 is not too high.
No, that's not too high. So let's say Caleb goes 1, Maye goes 2. Could New England shock us and take JJ at 3? I mean, honestly, that's not the worst. That's not the worst fit.
I don't think Washington is going to be picking it 2.
You could be right. I think
Washington might be picking it 1, guys. I really do.
Yeah, but you're wrong.
Think about it. Think about it.
No, you're wrong. No.
Think about it.
I'm not going to
think about it. Cliff Kingsbury's the offensive coordinator there. Caleb comes from DC, Gonzaga High School.
The Bears want Caleb, though. They're not going to trade out of it.
How do we know that?
Because Fields is the worst.
That doesn't mean they want Caleb.
I think they want. Well, okay, so that's also true.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Well, what if they really like Jaden? What if they really like JJ? What if they really like Drake? I don't.
Man, here's what I want to know. What do you mean by what's too high? Like it's off the table, not possible?
Yeah, or like stupid. Like what are you saying, John?
We're saying, is it possible? I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to say he can't go 1 over Caleb. The draft's weird, man. I don't think
you want to double down, Mark? You want to double down on this bet?
I'd want much better odds than the 100 to 1 I got on Jaden for that one, but I think it's possible. I don't think it's completely.
I think the draft
get into that top tier, it's weird things can happen, right?
Yeah.
It's not like he's like a Michael Pratt level or down. It's not like he's a rung down. So it's the same way with the receivers, right? We've seen Harrison was considered like he's in a tier of his own. He's locked up here at number 1, and now we've seen Neighbors and Odunze kind of climb up to where people are saying, well, maybe Harrison's the second receiver off the board. It's when you get to that top tier, if you can't split him, it gets weird.
I think 1 and 2 is too high. I think 3, if JJ McCarthy went 3rd overall to New England, I wouldn't endorse it. I wouldn't say that would be my move as a general manager, but I would say that's where if he went, I would say, all right, like, okay, yeah, like let's see what he's got. I think that's the team. Yeah.
All right.
Which Gentlemen, is crazy to say.
Been a great episode, as always. Going to go ahead and get us out of here. Make sure that you follow the show at Sick Pod NFL Draft. You can follow all of us at Draft Vogel, at Gam Scout, at Jarvis Scouting, and we're off. We'll be back next time. Shane, get us out of here.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.